Hey, welcome back everyone to another episode of Transitions from War. I'm your host Mike Ergo, a Marine Corps veteran. I've returned from Iraq and faced the challenges of PTSD, addiction, and grief to create a new life that is balanced and healthy in mind, body, and spirit. Each episode, I'll share my journey or interview inspiring veterans and subject matter experts to help us find that purpose and connection we all crave. You can follow the show on Instagram at Transitions from War. Join our TFW page on Facebook, Twitter, and transitionsfromwar.com to see the blog. If you've got questions, comments, or topic ideas, feel free to email me, Mike at transitionsfromwar.com. And if you guys enjoy the show, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. It helps us reach all those vets who need to be hearing this. All right. Today, my guest is Matt Decker of Paws for Purple Hearts. Matt is a Marine Corps vet, licensed clinical social worker, and the clinical director of Paws for Purple Hearts. Paws for Purple Hearts, or PPH for short, is dedicated to improving the lives of America's warriors facing mobility challenges and trauma-related conditions such as PTSD and TBI by providing the highest quality service dogs and canine-assisted therapeutic programs. Matt and I go way back. We worked together at the Concord Vet Center for a few years as therapists. Earlier this year, he introduced me to Paws for Purple Hearts, where I underwent the 2-week training to get my very own facility dog, Valor. And I'm a much happier person with this dog. So I owe that to Matt and the staff of PPH in Bergen. Anyways, what is a facility dog? What is a service dog? We get into all that and dive into the science behind why humans generally do better around canines and how they are used in therapy room to assist healing trauma. Okay, guys, I'll put the links to Matt's info in the show notes so you can connect with him if you want to learn more. But for now, here's my conversation with Matt Decker. Matt, welcome to the show. I've known you for a little while, and it's good to have you on here.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
So I know you, but lots of our listeners don't. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be with Paws for Purple Hearts and Bergen University?
Well, in that case, going to have to start about the time I met you working at the Concord Vet Center doing readjustment counseling with combat vets. When I was already doing a little bit of canine-assisted therapy, that's therapy with dogs. Dogs as an active participant in the therapeutic relationship, not just a piece of furniture in the room, but I actually got even further down this rabbit hole into canine therapy when I attempted to apply for a master's degree at the University of Canine Studies. Now, although the VA said, no, you can't go do that, the university and their partner at the time, Paws for Purple Hearts, said, hey, we'd like to talk to you about some stuff. And one thing led to another. And eventually I was helping Paws for Purple Hearts with a few favors here and there. I was helping the university with a few favors here and there. And one of those favors was they asked if I could write a job description for a clinical director. And I said, I can do that for you. So I wrote the job description, and eventually they turned it around and they said, okay, we want you to take the job. And after talking with the wife, because we all know the wife's not happy, ain't nobody happy, she said, you know, your wingspan gets big with veterans, and that was always my goal and focus. So started the job with Paws for Purple Hearts, and now I not only am I the clinical director for Paws for Purple Hearts, but I'm also the adjunct faculty for the University of Canine Studies, teaching about mental health disabilities and teaching a class called Dogs Helping Veterans, which is, as it sounds, a class all about dogs helping veterans.
You have a background that'd be important for a lot of our listeners, Marine Corps veteran, USC alum. What personally brought you to be connected with dogs before you even got into it professionally?
Well, like most vets, when I got back from the war zone, I struggled a little bit. I had a little bit of personal turmoil, a lot of transitions all at once. And what happened was I didn't like who I saw in the mirror when I got home after work. And so I decided that I needed to figure some stuff out. And so I attempted to go back to school, and that did not work. And so I ended up as a real low-level bachelor's therapist, which is pretty rare. You pretty much can only practice therapy at the bachelor's level when you live in a very, very small town that's so underserved that the Board of Behavioral Science is okay with it. And that's where my supervisor, who happened to be a Vietnam-era veteran, got me linked up with their equine, their horse therapist, the equine therapy. And I thought that was fantastic. And she was breaking into canine therapy. And I took one look at the impact the dogs had on the office itself, not even the clients, just the office itself. And I was amazed at the dramatic impact that the dogs had. And I thought to myself, there's something there and I want to tap into it. And so I started spending as much time as I could with that specific therapist, learning all about the equine and the canine therapeutic dynamic. And although I love horses, there's definitely a difference between working with a prey animal and working with a predator. And needless to say, as an old jarhead, I wanted the predator.
I noticed having a dog in the office or just around people without even doing any specific task. There's a lot of people have told me that they just feel better. It just, the presence of an animal there has lightened the mood of, people working.
Absolutely. The fact of the matter is whether we like it or not, having dogs domesticated tens of, and depending on who you talk to, hundreds of thousands of years ago, it has not only altered the brain of the domesticated dog, but it's also altered the brain of the human. You can't affect one without the other. Now, granted, we don't generally say that a lot, but it is true. If we domesticated the dog must have done something to us in return. And so the levels of oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine all in the brain increase throughout the entire bloodstream. An absolutely fantastic natural medication.
Right. And so we've co-evolved, like both species have changed as a result of this domestication that's affected both the humans and the dogs.
Absolutely.
And so you talked about some of the different neurotransmitters and oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, all things that make you feel good in different ways.
Yep.
How does this work out practically, like day to day with people just being around animals and being around dogs in particular?
Well, so there's actually an entire line of research based on how to affect these chemicals. And oddly enough, the current prescription for engaging with a well-trained dog to elicit those chemicals is eye gazing, petting, and active play. Now, for petting, there's a really specific prescription. It's 30 pets per minute to get the significance of elevated chemicals in the bloodstream. Now, I can't even begin to imagine how the researchers found that out, but I will tell you that ever since I learned that, I'm very conscious about the rate at which I stroke the dog.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they, not enough petting, too much petting changes it. But okay, so that's roughly petting once every couple seconds.
Yep.
So that's petting a dog. Okay, so you got that, and then you got eye gazing. Tell us how that works.
So eye gazing is just like, it's the same as when you look into your significant other's eyes and you get that slightly warm feeling. That's generally an oxytocin release. And as you're staring into the eyes of, let's go with a beloved pet, you feel that bond kick in, and the brain automatically supports the neurosynapses that are already built in that will help the oxytocin fire in the bloodstream. So
can you speak exactly what is oxytocin doing? What does it make you feel like?
Oxytocin is the bonding chemical. Oxytocin is the same chemical that gets released during childbirth, specifically during the first session of breastfeeding, where a mother will bond with her infant. And the reason the body gets flooded like that is because the body wants to be bonded to the infant. The same thing happens during sex at climax, where the body feels that rush of oxytocin. It's that warm, connected feeling that we have to our sexual partner, which is a natural response based on the fact that as basically a packing animal, humans want to bond with the person that they're mating with.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. You got petting, eye gazing, and then you said active play. Can you define that? And what is that? How does that look?
So active play would be defined as anything that gets the human's heart rate above 100 beats per minute. And with that elevation, even if there's relatively low activity, anything that elevates the heart rate above that 100 beats per minute would be considered having an active heart rate. Now, that can be emotionally elicited by just being happy that the dog is running after the ball, being synchronized with that dog and watching that dog utilize all of its muscles, go get the ball and bring it back, and then throwing it again. Because that's active participation, the heart rate naturally elevates as it synchronizes with the dog, generally up to around 105 beats per minute, which stimulates the body to say, we're active, we need to release additional hormones and chemicals to keep the body active. The same thing be, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, oh, definitely. And 100 beats per minute, to put in perspective, that's not that high. That's relatively low. So it seems like this is something that anyone can do. I mean, you're going to reach 100 beats per minute. A lot of people will do that just walking.
Yes. When you go for a walk with your dog, obviously your heart rate could very easily get above 100 beats per minute, plus the activity with the dog and the eye gazing, along with socialization. So as you take your dog out for a walk, all of these things are stimulating the brain and releasing additional positive chemicals, which is why service dogs are so fantastic at helping veterans break through isolation.
Well, I've noticed that too, just, walking my own dog and how many people want to stop and say hi and have just very easygoing, friendly interactions. I mean, it's just a magnet for people.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It seems so natural. Like all of these things you're talking about too are far different than what we see, traditional therapy techniques of, processing things or talking about feelings. This is just simply interacting with an animal and sometimes other people in ways that people have always done in so many different contexts.
And the fact of the matter is we didn't even really know what we were doing. We just kind of knew as a species, we knew that it felt good and that we just wanted to keep doing it. And yet now we've been able to provide the science behind it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how do you use these three techniques, with people like in a therapeutic setting? Is there any specific order you do these things, or is it just kind of let it evolve naturally and try to guide them into these three different kind of activities?
Generally speaking, I take two different approaches. One is a basically therapist disengaged approach where I let the dog and the client engage at their own pace. And I don't direct really anything of it. My very first therapy dog was named Maggie, and I had her specifically trained to push a social interaction on any human that basically came into the office. Now, it's not that she would ever behave badly because she was always appropriate, but from very early on in my therapeutic career, I found that if I set the tone, the relationship never really, it seemed to mean less to the client. But as soon as I let go of that and I let the client set the boundaries for the dog, and as long as the dog maintained the appropriate boundaries, I could just stay out of it. Maggie, my very first therapy dog, would steal clients' coffee. She, for some reason, loves coffee. And it almost became a game for the client to have to set and keep a boundary, which was absolutely phenomenal when the client had an issue with self-esteem, because they could practice on the dog. They could even hurt the dog's feelings, and the dog would come back for an emotional repair with no coaxing and no judgment, just, if I violated your boundary, I'm sorry, please love me. And then that client could, with no judgment and no reservations, go, I forgive you, and re-engage. Great practice in that respect. The other way to think about it is where the therapist directs the interaction. And my second therapy dog, Larson, he sometimes needed a little bit more coaxing. And so in that respect, the clients would ask me permission to engage the dog. I would provide the release command. He would then approach them and start to push boundaries. But he was always much more respectful than my first therapy dog. And so you can do them where the therapist initiates the relationship. I have found in my personal practice that allowing the dog to initiate seems to help solidify the relationship and communication between the client and the dog more effectively.
That makes a lot of sense, because then the people aren't waiting for you to take the lead when these things happen. I totally
Exactly.
get that. The thing I was noticed about eye contact, is you're saying that in eye gazing, is that it's pretty intense for some people to make eye contact with other people for more than, a millisecond. And you add trauma into the mix with that, and making eye contact becomes dangerous for a lot of people, just the idea of it. So, but even with people that I've worked with or talked with that are carrying trauma with them, making eye contact with a dog is not a big deal. And especially the kind of dog I have, just a golden retriever, black lab mix, very easy gaze.
Soft eyes. And it's not something that we generally see in the eyes of a human. And now this could just be neuroscience, or it could be a social construct. I don't know. But I have found that when people gaze into the eyes of my dogs, they see empathy, and they feel sympathy coming towards them, and love and affection. But yet when they do that same thing to a human counterpart, they see resentment and they feel judgment. And again, I can't tell you if that's neuroscience, but I know that every once in a while I have felt the same way.
Yeah, there's a lot less risk in doing it too. I mean, if you look the same way lovingly that you would at a dog, which comes naturally at a person, people can interpret that different ways, whether that's like sexual interest or just a lot of different ways they can interpret that. So I get it why it would be much easier to do that with a dog than other people.
Well, also, it creates great practice for the client. Depending on if you have a childhood sexual trauma history, or a teenage-based self-esteem issue, or a moral injury for our combat vets, there has to be some practice. And there are lots of times when I have worked with clients and their personal dogs, and they say, well, I always feel weird when I get close to my significant other. And yet their dog's laying on the couch, laying across their lap and like licking their hands. And I said, do you feel awkward with the dog? They say, no. I said, so you can engage in intimacy building. It's the people aspect. They said, yeah. Well, so I have them practice intimacy building with the dog. And then when they go home and they take their dog home with them, I say, I want you to mirror what you do with the dog with your partner. So if it's just, if it's you're petting the dog, you can stroke your significant other's hair or rub their shoulder. And all of a sudden it becomes a little less daunting and a lot less anxiety provoking.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it also shows that, people already have a lot of these skills, and some of the narrative of especially vets coming back, it's that stereotype of the broken veteran who can't do things and needs to be fixed. But what I like about what you're saying here, and the story I try to help people buy into, is that they already have these skills. It's simply relearning them or restarting, what they already know.
Absolutely. We all know the skill is there. When we went to war, we changed, we came back, and I would say sometimes the skills feel like they've been misplaced, but they're still there. But my wartime experience wasn't anything compared to most, and I know that I needed to go find those skills.
Right. I like that, and it's empowering. So switching gears a little bit, talking about dogs, I think there's so much confusion in terms of what a working dog is, like what a service dog is, what an emotional support animal is, what a facility dog, a therapy dog is. The terms get all conflated. Can you help us break down what means what?
Sure. Uh, so I'll start with the legal context. So a service dog is a dog that has specialized training to provide a specific set of service skills to mitigate a disability to one individual.
Okay, so it's one person who has an identified disability, and the dog is providing a service to aid them with that disability.
Yes. Now, that oddly sounds very specific. However, it's incredibly general, because then you can talk about mobility versus psychiatric service.
Okay, so like people in wheelchairs versus people who have, a mood disorder, or who have, PTSD.
Right. Visible wounds versus invisible wounds.
So how does this play out? We'll get back to that. So we got a service dog, and what are some of the other categories?
So we've got service dog, then we've got emotional support animals. Now, emotional support animals are not specifically trained to mitigate a disability. They could possibly be completely untrained. However, they do have some legal protections. They are generally prescribed by a mental health professional and live in the home. They don't have any public access rights, but they do have the right under the Americans with Disabilities Act, fair housing, which means you can't tell someone with an emotional support animal that they can't live in let's say, an apartment complex. And they also have the right, oddly enough, to travel by air. So the dog the Chihuahua that you see in the cabin of the airplane, if it's an emotional support animal, it's allowed to be there. But the thing that's important to remember about what we call them ESAs is that they aren't specially trained. These are realistically pet dogs that have found some work to do in their home.
Okay, that makes sense. So a lot lower level of training, which could be none. So when you say public access, I mean, for the people listening, that's, you can't take them into stores, restaurants, on public transportation, things like that.
Correct. And then the other category is, some people call them facility dogs, some people call them therapy dogs.
Those can be used interchangeably?
Depending on the organization you're talking with, yes.
Okay.
Now, at Paws for Purple Hearts, we actually break out a whole nother category called specialist therapy dogs, which are dogs that we give specifically to mental health professionals.
I see.
To perform canine-assisted therapy. The other two, much more commonly known, a therapy dog is a dog that provides service to people other than the handler. They are
Okay.
specially trained. They have generally passed a canine good citizen test. They may have even passed a public access test through Assistance Dogs International. However, they're not specifically trained to mitigate a disability, but they are trained to basically help humans elicit that serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin release.
Okay, so this would be a
That's
dog
therapy.
brought into a school, brought into a hospital, brought into a setting where the handler is letting the dog interact with other people for their benefit.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Facility dogs are generally dogs that are specialized, that they don't have any public access rights except in the facility in which they belong, and they generally don't have a handler. These are just well-behaved dogs that can roam a facility openly without a leash or a collar, and they are content to just interact with whoever passes by.
Okay, yeah. Wow. So no wonder it's confusing for people, especially when we have organizations who aren't totally on board with the same definitions. I imagine for your line of work, it creates a lot of confusion and a lot of defining terms when you talk to people.
We try to make sure that everybody understands exactly which dogs are doing which type of work. specifically so that we can realistically stay in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and so that we can represent our industry, that being service dogs and those that require a service dog for sheer life improvement. We want to make sure that everybody's on board so that when people see our vest, when they see a dog that is labeled by Paws for Purple Hearts, they know that that dog is squared away.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, okay, let's take an average veteran looking to get a dog to help them just feel better. What are the advantages of getting a service dog versus getting a mental health professional to write them a letter for emotional support animal? I mean, what's right for who?
Well, getting a service dog, or even frankly even an emotional support animal, is a very personal decision. We've had veterans come to us that have gotten most of the way through the process, and then they decide that somebody else needs the dog more than they do, and they'll drop out of off of our wait list because of that. And what I would tell your listeners is that if you're a veteran that is struggling if you're a veteran that's struggling to live the life that you want to live, and having a service dog, or let me phrase that, having a dog with you all the time, truly all the time, would improve your quality of life, you ought to do more research and identify if your life can handle having a service dog, because it really is life-changing, and if your living situation and your family can handle that in and of itself. Because oddly enough, something that we have found is that traditionally speaking, our clients are mostly male at Paws for Purple Hearts, and sometimes we've noticed that significant others, wives and husbands, they can get jealous about the fact that the veteran is so functional and they couldn't do it, but the dog could help.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's complicated. Yeah.
It's extremely complicated. I definitely would encourage anybody that's even thinking about it to contact a couple of service dog organizations and have a discussion. There's nothing wrong with asking the questions. And I know that my client services manager has a standing order that if anybody wants to come fill out our application, she will help them do it. If they want to go fill out applications from other service dog organizations, she'll help them do that as well.
Oh, right. Is this Casey?
That's Casey.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, big shout out to Casey. She has done an amazing job with our clients and super civilian to max.
Yeah. So when I, just for the listeners, when I went through the client training, the 2-week process at Bergen University, I went through it with Casey, who was working for Paws for Purple Hearts, who's now in this position.
Yeah, she got promoted. She went from our advancement team in Menlo Park and was brought up to the national office only a couple of months ago. And she's actually running our whole client services department for both Bergen University of Canine Studies and Paws for Purple Hearts.
So one thing I'm wondering is just the idea of rebuilding trust. And it seems like dogs are pretty good at doing that for people, especially people who are carrying trauma, people who experience moral injury, people who have had a hard time trusting people who've grown up in dangerous places. What is it about working with a dog that helps people begin to relearn how to trust other people?
Well, I'm working on this theory of thought, and right now I'm calling it the door of dog. And
the door of dog.
The door of dog, because having a dog at your side 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, opens up a different door to the public, a safer door. And being able to see the world and to have the world see you through the door of dog provides that buffer, kind of like somebody that wants to dip their toe into the pool of water just to see what temperature it is. And then go a little further into that pool until they are fully submersed in a social interaction that is actually enjoyable. Because what we know in the mental health field is that past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. So what we have to do is we have to impact behavior now through working with a service dog. The veteran gets the opportunity to relearn experiences that had previously been very threatening through the door of dog, now become much less threatening. Neural synapses then adjust the way they fire. Instead of going through an anxiety process with the presence of the dog, the human brain learns to fire in a way that doesn't provoke anxiety. The dog all of a sudden becomes the medication for that veteran to go out and engage with the rest of the world.
Yeah, I've seen this with people who have social anxiety or nervous talking to other people. All of a sudden, you get two people meeting, and they're really just talking about the dog and asking questions about it. But the actual process, if they have some nervous feelings, usually kind of rise and fall rather quickly, and then they relearn that, okay, not only do I not have to just talk about myself necessarily and have a more face-to-face, I guess, what could be an intimidating interaction, but it's enough of a distraction to where they can focus on, oh, how old's your dog, what's its name, and everything like that, and still feel safe in that interaction. Is that how it goes?
Yeah, the public views someone with a dog, especially one of the dogs that we breed, the golden retrievers, the Labrador retrievers, and the mix therein, that those soft eyes, we as veterans become less threatening, and the public themselves are less threatening to us because no one really wants to upset the dog.
Yeah, that's a great point. People don't want to disappoint or upset the dog.
I have been in my office working with a vet, and just because he was salty, he wanted to try and startle me. Now, I will tell you that this vet specifically slammed his hands down on the desk in my office, and I will tell you, I jumped. I jumped about a mile out of my seat, but so did the dog. And he didn't feel bad about startling me, but he apologized immensely to the dog. And he never did it again.
So there's so many different interactions where people's behavior can be modified for the better just with the presence of the dog, whether it's theirs or not. It seems like just in the situation.
And I always hope that as a good, or at least as a mediocre therapist, I can take advantage of that and show people that there are better ways to do things.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, okay, one question I've been wondering, what do we do when we see these people out in public who have the fake service dog patches on their and vests on their dogs? Do we claim stolen valor and make a video on our cell phone and shame them in public, or what's the protocol?
Oh, I can, again, personal behavior, but my theory behind it all is that if the dog is not actively causing distress to other people, I will generally leave it alone. In fact, I was with my dog Larson at the San Francisco VA just last week, and a very small, very untrained dog came after him, and Larson and I just walked on by. There was no need. I'm a kind of a live and let live person at this point in my life. So my recommendation is quite literally, if there's no danger, then let the fake service dog sit in the grocery cart and bark a couple of times.
Yeah, what harm is it really causing? And I'm always thinking. So this a couple of years ago, I'm on the way to help facilitate a retreat of a bunch of combat vet Marines, and I'm stopping in this gas station in Chico, and this lady is carrying this probably like a teacup Chihuahua, the tiniest thing, and it has this vest, and it says service dog on it. I don't know how they may even made a vest this small, but this dog was shaking so hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I started thinking, you probably need a service dog for your service dog. because this dog is just traumatized just by being out in public. But yeah, it wasn't really causing any harm. Seemed to make the lady feel better. So yeah, I kind of just let it go. But what else do people need to know about animals and service dogs, or if it's right for them?
Well, first I want to definitely mention to your audience that just because it's a Chihuahua or it's little doesn't actually mean that it's not a service dog. I met an actual legitimate service Yorkie when I worked for the VA. I'm not kidding you. The dog was so small. The vest didn't even read service dog. All it read was PTSD, and because that's all it could fit on the vest.
Oh man, I would have loved to see this little thing.
It was fantastic. Well, so I walked up to the handler and I said, "What a dog you've got there." And he just looked at me and he goes, "Yeah, I know. But the fact is, she sits on my lap and I don't have any more anxiety." And I just looked at him and I said, "Good for you, man. Like, keep on living the dream."
Quality of life improved. Yeah.
Quality of life. Yeah. And yeah, he was a vet and he worked for the VA. And I thought to myself, wow, boy, was I wrong. Because that was my first thought, is like, oh, look, it's a Yorkie with a vest that says PTSD.
Yeah.
But the dog was perfectly behaved, knew all of its commands. And literally the dog was trained to sit and lay down in this gentleman's lap. And that was the deep pressure therapy that he needed to engage and do his job, which I'm under the impression he was phenomenal at. He worked at the, where did he work? He worked for the VA in Fairfield when I was there.
Oh, that's perfect.
The other thing I want your listeners to know is when you engage with someone with a service dog, don't just look at the dog. You got to look up at the human being. Engage the human. If you want to engage about the dog, then engage with the human and then look at the dog. But if you spend your entire conversation with this fantastic American hero just staring at their dog, you didn't actually engage the person.
That's a good point. The other thing that goes along with it that none of us mentioned yet is, ask someone if you can engage with their dog and touch them.
Always ask. And frankly, that doesn't matter if it's a service dog, an emotional support animal, or just a pet dog being walked on the street. And dogs are fantastic creatures. They're wonderful animals. But just like in humans, there are some that don't like strangers. So you should always ask before you touch somebody else's dog.
That's a good point. So where can people find you, and where can people learn more about if a service dog is right for them?
Well, if they'd like to know more about Paws for Purple Hearts and maybe take a look at what it takes to get a service dog, they can visit us at www.pawsforpurplehearts.org. And that's Paws spelled P-A-W-S. And if they would like to see what our organization is doing around the country, they can check us out on Facebook at Paws for Purple Hearts National Office. And
Great.
if they have any questions,
I'll put all these links on our show notes, so everybody listening, go ahead and check that out.
That's great. And I do actually get some of those messages from the Facebook account. So if you have a message, if you have a question that you just want to shoot me, that's fine. You can just mention me by name in a private message, and it'll get to me within at least a couple of hours, and I can get on a chat with you.
That's really cool. Awesome. Well, thanks, Matt. I appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to let us know a lot more about service dogs, and especially all the cool work you've been doing with Paws for Purple Hearts.
I appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate all the work you're doing, helping our vets stay squared away.
Hell yeah, man. Kill bodies. So that concludes today's episode of the Transitions from War podcast with me, Mike Ergo. I really hope you enjoyed it today. And you can follow the show on Instagram at Transitions from War. Join our TFW page on Facebook, Twitter, and transitionsfromwar.com. If you have any questions, comments, or topic ideas, email me, mike@transitionsfromwar.com. Y'all, if you enjoy this show, please leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcast or wherever you are getting this podcast. It helps us to get more exposure while we try to reach as many vets as possible. And of course, if you have friends you think might like the show, be sure to share it with them. All right, guys. Thank you to our sponsor. Thank you to Cowboy Crickets. Thank you to Tattered Beans. Thank you to Zilios. Everyone go check them out. We got a lot of cool deals, a lot of cool promo codes. So look at the show notes, buy their stuff, be happy. All right, guys, that's it for now. So thanks for listening. And until next time, remember to drink water, meditate, and kill bodies.